Can a state execute a person for a crime committed as a child? To find out, you have to read Thompson versus Oklahoma. But it's 20 pages long. Don't have time for that? I've got you covered. This is TLDR, where normally I cover New York Court of Appeals in 5 minutes or less. But this is part of a special series on landmark cases from the United States Supreme Court. This is the episode on the case of Thompson versus Oklahoma, published on June 29, 1988, with a citation of 487 U.S. 815. The issue in this case is whether A, the state can execute a child. To best understand this case, a little background is helpful. The Eighth Amendment to the United States Constitution prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. The full text of that amendment reads as follows: excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. So what are the facts in this case? This case involves a brutal murder that shook up the state of Oklahoma with its brutality. Defendant Thompson was 15 years old, and along with 3 older people, the defendant murdered his former brother-in-law on January 23, 1983. The victim was shot, cut, suffered a broken leg, and was chained to a block and thrown in a river. Because of how brutal the crime was, the district attorney filed an application to prosecute the defendant as an adult rather than as a child. The judge allowed the district attorney to treat the 15-year-old as an adult offender. Each of the 4 participants were tried separately, and each was sentenced to death. The 15-year-old defendant appealed his death penalty sentence on the grounds that it violated the Eighth Amendment. He claimed that killing a 15-year-old would constitute cruel and unusual punishment. The Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals upheld the death sentence, finding that Thompson's age did not preclude the ultimate punishment of death. The case was then appealed to the United States Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, in a 5-3 decision, held that executing a person for a crime committed at age 15 violated the Eighth Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment. Why? The majority said there is an evolving standard of decency that marks a maturing society. Writing for the plurality, Justice John Paul Stevens emphasized that the death penalty is reserved for the rarest of crimes committed by the most culpable offenders. The court recognized that juveniles, due to their lack of maturity and underdeveloped sense of responsibility, could not be placed in this category of death penalty eligible. The court also noted the national consensus against executing juveniles. While Oklahoma law permitted the death penalty for 15-year-olds, only a handful of states allowed such a practice. The lack of national consensus further supported the court's view that executing juveniles offended the evolving standards of decency. The 3 dissenting justices argued that the court had overstepped its bounds, substituting its own judgment for that of the Oklahoma legislature, which had authorized this punishment. They maintained that the Eighth Amendment did not categorically prohibit the death penalty for juveniles, leaving the decision to the states. This case has truly been a landmark in criminal law. It reflected a growing recognition that children are different from adults and should not be held to the same level of culpability. The court's emphasis on evolving standards of decency opened the door for future challenges to harsh punishments for juveniles. It served as a catalyst for reform in the juvenile justice system. In the wake of this case, many states revisited their laws regarding the death penalty for juveniles, with some abolishing it altogether. Thompson versus Oklahoma reminds us that justice must be tempered with mercy, especially when dealing with young offenders. Prior to Thompson, the court had already established that the Eighth Amendment's protections extended to juveniles, recognizing their diminished culpability due to their youth and immaturity. If you like what you just saw and want to see more just like it, Please hit like or subscribe to let me know.